Okay, so thanks everybody for coming. This is Groovy at Gr8Ladies. I'm Jen Strader. This is an introductory talk on Groovy, the programming language. Okay. So who am I? Like I said, my name's Jen Strader. I am a software engineer at a company called Sacred Health. We are in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Been there about a year now, came from the East Coast. Outside of work, I also run an organization called Gr8Ladies. It is an organization for the support of women in the Groovy ecosystem. Let's see. And other things. Oh yeah, and I'm doing another talk at 3:45 if you want to know more about me and my community, how I got involved in the community, along with Mike and Mike and Keith. Yeah. Okay. Next part. So kind of like to play a little poll of the audience. Who are you guys? Are there any college students here? Didn't expect. Okay, that helps. Hopefully, everyone's a professional developer. Maybe. How about tech? Java? Okay. Lots of Groovy programmers come from or have a background in Java. It's an easy transition to make. I hear lots of .NET, maybe. Okay. I don't know much about .NET / anything, so hopefully you can help me make some comparisons and hopefully it makes sense. Any PHP, Python, anything else? Okay. I was a PHP developer before, it's okay.
You overcame.
Did anyone come in already knowing Groovy?
I'm working on a project for 2 weeks, so
okay.
That's not much.
Good. Yeah, go right in. That's okay. Let's see. Groovy. Okay. With that said, I may say something wrong. I am still a little new at public speaking, and the best way to get better is to learn how to teach someone else. But no one here seems to know Groovy, so they may not know I'm saying anything wrong. But that said, yeah, you're gonna trust me. The other thing, I am kind of nervous, so I'm gonna probably speed up and I may misspeak, say the wrong thing. If it doesn't make sense, please stop me and ask a question, because I probably didn't mean to say that. Okay. So originally I'd written this talk, Groovy at Gr8Ladies. I have been working on a website, mostly solo, so I haven't gotten as far as I'd like in that. Mostly what Gr8Lady does right now is teaching, because we need more women to help us work on the website. So this is kind of an outline of what I see this talk, or what I'd like to go over today. Basic overview, what's Groovy, some basic data types. It's gonna be probably pretty boring going over some of the middle things. I'll try to keep it a little interactive. Loop searching, have a few examples hopefully you can help me with. And if we have time, I'd like to get to kind of some API processing and some Chuck Norris jokes. Okay. So first, what's Groovy? By definition, it's a dynamic compiled language that runs on the JVM. Means dynamic if you were familiar with Python, PHP, any of those other languages, but it's compiled and runs on the JVM. Okay, so why learn yet another programming language? Groovy is not going to be the best programming language for every situation. I'm not going to try and advocate for that, but if you're familiar with Java architecture or looking for that stability, and you know, and you're looking to increase your productivity, because Groovy is going to add in a whole bunch of shortcuts to make everything easier. Okay, and it's not just about learning everything and prototyping. There are major companies using this, even just within, well, Netflix is California, but within Minneapolis, Best Buy, Target, my own company, we're all trying to hire Groovy developers right now. And even Wells Fargo has approached the Groovy users group trying to recruit as well. Okay. More about Groovy. It is completely free and open source. It's maintained by a company called Pivotal. They hire full-time developers to work on it, but anyone can contribute. And it's a very active repository. It's all on GitHub. Documentation, groovylang.org. That's the new site there. You may see some references to the old documentation as well. Okay, so once you kind of learn the basics of the Groovy programming language, there are a lot of frameworks, everything built on top of this. So this is what there's a lot of great stack, Groovy ecosystem, different things that come in here. Most popular one is going to be Grails. So Grails is the full stack web framework that uses Groovy. A lot of people, especially recruiters, tend to get Groovy and Grails mixed up, but Groovy is the language, Grails is the framework. If you're more of a desktop person, there's Griffin. It's a much smaller community, but does still have a desktop application. You may have heard of Gr8L. It's a build tool as well. Another thing in here, you can use Gr8L to build Android applications. And now Groovy, there is a person or a group of people working on converting or making Groovy libraries for Android development. Okay. Sometimes you may use some, at my office we use most of the Grails or Groovy stack and use Grails. Some companies just use it for testing. So Spock and Job are two testing frameworks that are pretty popular. And sometimes you may not want to use everything that's all in Grails because it's pretty heavy at this point. So you can use Ratpack, which is what this presentation is running on actually. Just really lightweight web framework that you can, and this is reveal.js, so it just runs that. Okay, there's, lots of other things. It's a pretty well-established community, lots of projects. Okay, so how does this all fit together? So not the best drawing, but it keeps getting propagated, and I'm helping with that. So on the bottom is the JVM. The main thing to notice here is that Groovy compiles down to bytecode. It's often misinterpreted that Groovy goes to Java and then down, but no, Groovy does compile down to bytecode. It is slightly different. And then the nice thing about it is that Groovy can pull in some existing Java libraries. So it makes it really interoperable with Java. Okay. Okay. So when do you want to use Groovy? If you have Java libraries, Java developers, you're going to be very familiar with the ecosystem already, and it's pretty easy to switch into Groovy. It's startup weekend a couple months ago, used Grails just to kind of quick prototyping of our startup weekend application. Really easy to set up, lots of code generation. Scripting, even yesterday, is using it just to process or on some basic file scripting things. And like I said before, writing tests as well. When to not use Groovy. If you have lots of legacy code in another language, especially something completely different, say Ruby, I would not advocate to switch all of your code to Groovy. The other thing is that there is a little bit of a trade-off. So the Groovy compiler is not as efficient as just Java. So you increase your productivity, but you do add a little bit of overhead. So that's, it's in small projects, it's negligible, but we are finally starting to see some growing pains at work on scaling. And it's mostly how it's implemented. So we're going back and just thinking about performance. Okay. So hopefully this shows, okay. There are two main ways you can kind of get introduced to Groovy if you just want to try it out. The console, which I'm going to be using today for some examples. I am tempting the demo gods to hopefully let me live code. And then quick and dirty shell as well. If anyone has their laptop and wants to follow along, there is, Wi-Fi seems pretty good here. There is an online console. groovyconsole.appspot.com is the one that I prefer. I guess I'll give you guys a minute if you actually want to. Everybody good? So in general, there are three basic principles, things to remember about Groovy that are going to come up a lot in this presentation. There's more than one way to do almost everything. I'm going to try to show different ways to implement things so that we get a rounded approach. It's probably optional. So Groovy is very loose. Semicolons optional, typing optional, parentheses around your parameters and your return statements. Do remember that last one, because sometimes I can come back to bite you, that the last thing that's executed is what's returned by default. So if you got, unless it's void. But yeah, so even if you don't specify the return, it's just going to return the last thing that was executed. Obligatory hello world. So you can take Java. So if you do, full main function, everything, it will mostly run in Groovy. But and so this is how you transition from Java to Groovy, because it accepts a lot of the Java syntax and everything. And then you slowly learn the different ways to do things groovier. So basic print line, you can see no semicolons. You don't need parentheses around the parameter. It's just taking print line of hello, I have a code camp. Okay. So now that we've gotten the obligatory hello world out of the way, we can take a little deeper look at some data types. So what I'd like to go through today, in addition to, you've got in school your standard things, the way, and some of the things that are really nice about Groovy is the way that it's got a lot of string libraries, collections, and this is just an overview. There is way more to Groovy than I can do in an hour and 15 minutes. My hope is to just give you a little bit of what it looks like and then the resources to get you going further. So collections, the ones I'm going to go over are lists, maps, and ranges. Then closures. So closures mean something slightly different in a lot of different programming languages. So I'm going to go over kind of how that works in Groovy. The other thing is that since Groovy is optionally typed, there's this def that you may see floating around. So def, short for define, is just the generic Java. It roughly translates to a Java object. So when you don't care about what type it is, or we use it positively if we want to, like with polymorphism, you can switch out what type is actually getting passed to something. You would use def. Okay. So first we're going to look at strings. And now I get to try my fate at live coding. Okay, so I did want to do this the first time to actually pull this up for you and show you kind of how it works. So there is a package manager, JVM. So I'm going to specify, I'm going to use 2.2.2. It is not the newest version, but it's what I've been working with for a lot of this training material. Getting the console started is pretty simple. Oh yeah, it did say that. Okay, so we should have mega size text. So we're going to do generic hello world. So here's a single quoted string, plain text. This hopefully should all be familiar for other languages too. Other thing to do is double quoted. So if I want to inject something, so it's $. I could also inject, well, $sign will directly inject that one thing. If you want to do something embedded, like this, you need the curly braces around whatever you're putting in. I found that pretty similar to PHP and some other languages. Okay, so that's single quoted strings and double quoted strings. The next thing to do would be multi-line strings. It is 3 quotes in the same way, single quoted for plain text and Double quote it if we want to inject something in. Okay, hello, I code camp from Grails. So that's basic strings. Any questions? Hopefully that's pretty self-explanatory. So now we can jump into collections. First one is going to be lists. So basic way to define a list L, that is an L, not a 1. And I'm really bad at coming up with generic names, so A, B, and 2. You'll notice you can do homogeneous and heterogeneous lists in Groovy. So first thing, define access, okay, is that we may want to print one of the elements. So L, you can either do, well, I mean, with lists you're using numerical indexes. The other next thing you may want to do is you may want to assign it. So you can do L at 2 is equal to 3, then, and actually this is kind of a good place to show you that the default is returned. So this, the last thing is returned. I have to explicitly write that I want to print the whole list now. Okay. Next thing, you can add and append. That's a left shift to add things to the end of the list. I could alternatively, and there's lots of what's called method overloading. So I can do all of this is the same. Yes. Okay. Lots of ways to do the same thing. Most of it's going to get converted down to some very core things, but the idea is that your productivity is going to increase if you can do things simply. Okay. So next thing is maps. Maps are just like lists except with key value pairs. Again, I'm really bad to oh, I need to make this a map now. So maps are defined pretty simply, square brackets, key, colon, value, strings, mixed typing, lots and lots of flexibility here. So the next thing, you may want to access things. So there are 2 ways you can access your keys, either by dot notation or like this. You do need to put the quotes around it when you're in the square brackets. Okay, I can also, and one of the things kind of didn't show with list as well, you don't have to, I mean, there aren't sizing, you can just add things at will. So I can just add 5, is that what I was using? And now I have an additional value here.
So are those keys like a different data type? Like, is there a reason, can they be strings too, or any other object?
Yes. Pretty much anything you can put in there.
Like, can you create those in the list? Like, are they their own separate thing, or is that only syntax that works with them? I'm thinking of like, it's like Ruby, right? You have the colon keyword things.
So you're thinking like M of, because I mean, something simple. 5? I mean, that's a number instead of a string. I'm trying to think of another example. I mean, you could do objects too. And this is normally how, because we get these super embedded object structures, and then they come out to be hash maps and lists, and they convert pretty easily and have all these standard.
Yeah, so like, let's say you had a list of the keys. Would they be strings then, or would they be just those uncoded values?
And actually, that is right. Okay, so we've got the key set, and then we want to know what class. Yeah, haven't gotten to some of the rest of this yet, but okay, so key set to get all your keys, values to get all your values, and I think that's maps.
So can you take away the keyword map, but it still work with?
Yeah.
Clearly recognize that's a map without telling you it's a map.
Yeah, so that's very powerful.
Similar to bar in that way.
Yeah, I mean, var and anything else that's optionally typed or not typed.
I'm sorry, so, but if I had, immediately after that, could I set n equal to 2? And so,
Oh, because there's no values, but
okay, yeah, because so it's different than .NET.
Yes, yeah, that's
Okay.
And, yeah, in .NET, once it,
it's
bar
a
just means whatever's on the other side, when it's still statically typed
Mhm.
as that, it just can be whatever's on the other side.
Yep, you're inferring the type.
Yeah, it's an inferred type, it's not a variant type. In Java, yeah.
Okay, so we did lists, maps. Okay, ranges. Another thing just worth mentioning. So if you're only doing numbers, you can do incremental. This may exist in other places. So here is a list of numbers from 1 to 10. You can also do exclusive, so from 1 to 9, not including 10. That's not what I meant to say. So ranges are worth noting, just because it makes things even shorter. Okay. Next part, functions. Okay. So we're going to go from collections to closures, but in order to talk about closures, we should talk about how functions work in general. So this is very, very basic function. You've got your method signature, your function name, and then your parameters. Here where it says X, you can type them, you cannot type them. Almost everything's optional. There's no return statement, so it will take X multiplied by 2, double it, and just return that value. So it should be pretty flexible, but also familiar. And like I said, lots of things are optional in functions. What else was on my list? Oh, right, okay, because the next one is actually going to show it. So if we take double of 2, get 4, double 8, like I said, no, either parens, no parens, doesn't matter, doesn't care. So knowing how functions work in general, we can talk about closures. Okay, so closures are not completely unique to Groovy. There are many other languages with similar concepts. Even Java 8 responded and now has lambdas. So in Groovy, closures are code is data. So that means that you can take a piece of functionality and pass it around like a variable, including as a parameter to another function. Okay, so let's take a look and kind of see what we can do with this. Let's go back to console. Okay, so we can do either, there is a type closure, or def c is name year. Okay, so this is basic structure of a closure. Starts out equals, and then everything is encapsulated within curly braces. From the first curly brace until this arrow are your parameters. And actually, you can also type or not type it, and you can add default values in here as well. So the thing to do is that you can, actually, let me, so this is, I mean, it's a closure, it's not getting run, it's not getting executed until we go to call it. There are a couple different ways we can do this. There is an explicit call function, so I can call it with Iowa Code Camp, and it injects the 2014, and this should be. Alternatively, we could even simplify it further. I can overwrite the year, next year, lots of flexibility, and okay. Let's try to get through some more of the boring stuff so we can get to the fun stuff. So, lots of.
I'm sorry, can you go back to that for a second?
Sure.
So, when, can you scroll up in your results?
I clear them every time.
Oh, you
So
do?
are you,
Okay.
which one are you?
What's it, so, in .NET, I think we would just call this an anonymous method. And so, my understanding is that a closure is when you're referencing something outside the scope of an anonymous method. So, if you were to define, say, A above there, and print hello A main year, you're creating a closure on A. And so, but in your console window, I don't know what exactly I saw. It said something regarding a closure. And so I'm trying to tease out the difference of does Groovy call an anonymous method a closure, even if it doesn't reference outside scope?
So a closure is, it's highly debated. To me, I define it as a closure is a function that also contains its scope. So it has access to everything. It's referenced but not executed. So a closure, I think anonymous functions would be like a type of, a way that you could use closures. There's some overlap, and it's harder to, because there are some like edge cases.
Okay.
But the A would be in the scope, and you can see A in that function, so it's kind of a macro. That is, wherever I am now, I have access to the entire
Exactly.
scope.
You have access
Plus,
to
I can have my private things too.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I just at some point in your console window, it looked like there was some generated Groovy code that made mention of closure. I was trying to figure out what that was.
Here?
Yes. Run closure. So that makes me think that they do call any anonymous method, regardless of whether or not the reference table outside of it is empty or not, a closure. And if, okay, I mean that, I'm just trying to make sure I understand their nomenclature better, because I would in .NET land we would not call it that a closure. It's just an anonymous method. If there's no reference table, if you're not referencing something outside of it, then a closure is not created. Okay. So I'm just trying to tease out the differences. That's all.
And there, I mean, different languages do it differently, and there's a lot. I mean, I was Googling it to argue with someone, but
Oh no.
well, no,
it's
a debate
I'm
I've had.
calling it a closure.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So it's just generic. It's a generic thing that encompasses. That's my understanding of it. Okay. Okay, so closures are used a lot in looping and special functions. So basic for loops. We're going to go over two Groovy methods, each in collect, and then spread dot, which is what you saw me using earlier with the key set classes. So basic loop, kind of what you're taught in school for int I mean, the semicolon up to 4 increment here. You can do all of this is all valid Groovy, but we would make it groovier and add in an in function, which there are similar things. So it's just, and then I is going to be what you're naming it. So I in every element of this list. In this list, I chose numbers. You can make it objects, you can make it strings, anything you want can go in that. And then it just iterates through. So doubling things again, pretty simple examples. Okay. So hopefully this will get a little more interesting. So each, so you take, rather than iterating over using an n, you can do each. So each, I mean, doubling it isn't the best example, but you can have a closure. So this, do you see my cursor too? Okay. From here to here is a closure. So the each method gets passed a closure, no parens, because, and then it takes a value or a key and a value from this map. So it's splitting this object map out into each. If you did not specify this, it would pass in IT iterator. And you could access, so instead of doing key value, you would do it.value times 2. Pretty similar to Ruby and some other things I'm told. Okay. If you were just iterating over and collecting the results, there is a collect function. So it takes, rather than doing a return or assigning that into some other variable, it just runs through and collects all the results. Same example. Okay, so next kind of thing that's cool is spread dot. So that's the star dot here. So what we were doing earlier, here's a range from 1 to 3. And if we take the range as a whole as an object and multiply it, it doubles it. But you can use a spread dot to apply a function to each element of that collection. And that's something I think is really great and awesome, and I use all the time.
So what's that star after? What's the asterisk?
So so this is the spread dot. The star dot is called a spread dot. So you take the range from 1 to 3, and then you apply multiply to each element individually. So that's how we get the different. So here it doubles it compared to just taking the list as a whole.
So it's like shorthand for the each.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Groovy is just about shorthand.
Or the collect, I guess, because it's returning you another list. It's doing something
Also
to
true,
each
yes.
element and returning you. Yeah. Okay.
Dot star there. Star dot.
Yeah, so opposite. There's also some implicit, or so if you have like an object and there's only one, I mean, essentially, so if it's not super embedded, you can do dot, and you have, or objects that all have the same field name, for example. I'm going off script here. So if you have an object that, a list of objects, and they have the same field name, you can do list of objects dot field name, and it will pull all of those. You don't need the star, because it's doing that just implicitly. Okay, so that's special functions. Okay, so let's try it. If anyone has the console open. So this, I should probably explain a little bit of what this is. So we have a list of numbers, some are negative, some are positive. Here we would have a list, and then for each element in there, and then dot ABS is take the absolute value of it and print out the result. So if you notice, there's not a very big box in the bottom. There is a one-line solution to do this.
Does the double arrow there mean you're adding that value to the list?
Yes, so that's an append.
Like a list dot add.
Yeah.
So when you create that Groovy file, it would be a .groovy, right?
Yep.
Once you do that, can you mix Groovy and Java?
You can import Java.
Okay. You can't do Java syntax and Groovy syntax together. You have to pick
I
one or
mean,
another.
So Groovy syntax is, I mean, most thing. I haven't run into. There are a couple things when you like typing that doesn't convert, but most Java syntax is valid Groovy syntax.
Okay.
Is anybody doing the example? Okay. No, I did this in Phoenix and then found out they were all on IM. I was sitting and waiting for them to stop typing. But, okay. So are you ready for the result, maybe? Okay. So take the list, start up. Next thing we can try, so.
Can you go back to that?
Sure.
So I know there's a way you can call like .collect on it,
Mhm.
and then inside that there's the it parameter which references each one. I don't know enough Groovy, but you should be able to do something like it.abs, but that throws no such property value for class. So I don't know if I'm just doing it wrong, but there's, like you said, hundreds of ways you can do it even in just one line.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you know the syntax for that or if I.
Okay, so let's see. So you tried -1, some value, another negative value, dot collect.
Yeah.
And then you did it.abs.
Yeah.
Are you using the web console?
Mhm.
Is there any difference? Because there are things that are restricted. Like when I get to the API example, you can't grab certain classes in the web console.
Maybe that's what it's
and it may be using a different version as well.
I defined the list first and then did l.collect, so that shouldn't matter.
Did you use def or list to define?
Just list. List L equals what you have. I think it's just the console that.
Okay. So next example, to sum the numbers from 1 to 10. I have 3 different answers using the different functions. So. And the bonus answer is there's another one-liner. So. Anybody want to take a stab? Or stab at the solution?
Break, paren, 1, 2 periods, 10, left, or dot sum.
Yeah. So you get the bonus answer. You could use in each clip and then some, or many other things.
When you're doing the collect and you want to only care about the values, is there a way to ignore? Like, I know in some languages, if you use an underscore, that's a parameter to an anonymous function that you don't care about. So it's like pulling the values out.
The way I would do it is just to either, so you would do some lines of code and then either say value or return value, and then it would only return the values.
Okay. Yeah, I'm thinking of like pattern matching. So like if you have an object that has like 3 values in it, and you do like value 1, comma value 2, comma value 3, like it'll pull those out for you. So then if you only want 2 of them, you put an underscore for the 3rd one, and then it would not set that to a variable.
I wouldn't be surprised, but I haven't used it or looked at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have done multi-return, like, so you would do, I think it's paren, variable name 1, comma, variable name 2, paren, and then it would assign to first and second. That's interesting, I'll have to look that up. Okay, so you can also search, which is kind of, so this it.value, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so you can search a collection. And whether it's a map or list, I mean, typing again doesn't matter. So what I'm doing is I want to find the elements of this list, or this map, sorry, whose values are divisible by 2, but not by 3. Simple math stuff. If you do a find, it finds the first one. If you do a find all, it finds all of them. So there's major differences there between performance if you're finding the first one compared to having to traverse the entire collection. Just something, yeah, worth looking at. Hopefully we can do some fun stuff now. Okay, so hopefully this will copy. And actually it looks like /n didn't copy into there. Command. So we can hopefully see the whole thing. Okay, so this is a basic way to interface with APIs. The built-in library, there's also something throwing new at you, grab. I would use this in scripts, but not, so it pulls down a library and then you can use it here. Okay. So this is the Chuck Norris jokes database, if you aren't familiar with it. And then I'm going to take 5 random jokes. I don't want to have any awkward conversation, so I'm going to exclude the explicit ones. And so from this, and depending on which, REST-client is one option. There's lots of other builders and things that you can use in Groovy to get the response and the reader. So here we have a reader. If we look at the data structure for how these are returned from the API, it's a whole bunch of value. It's all in JSON. And so reader value actually might be somewhat useful. Not connected. Cut out. Okay, hopefully this works. So I'm going to take 5 jokes and then print out each of them and just add a new line for spacing. What we don't see here at the bottom, so that it should show, yeah, that it's downloading this dependency.
You gotta do jokes /random at the end of your API call there if you want to pull it up in the browser. So I just did the same thing. It didn't give me anything until I added that.
So this is the data structure. Well, that's downloading. We can look at this. So you've got all this other stuff, but the joke is actually embedded within this value and then joke. So that's where reader, value, joke, each. And hopefully, I wonder if I am kicked off the internet. It says it's. My script is already running. So stop this. And this is what I get for live coding. Okay. Oh, okay. So now we have 5 Chuck Norris jokes. There are ways, I mean, you can handle this too. So really basic, HTTP, you can do gets, you can do posts, lots of different libraries to do this. But here's a really easy one. I mean, this is 13 lines of code to grab and output 5 jokes on a screen. Much, much shorter, much more concise. Anything else? Anybody want to modify it, update it before we move on? So along with APIs, the other thing you may want to do is file processing. So there's some I/O things with Groovy. It opens and closes files. You just do new file. So we can do new file foo text. You can write to them. You can append to files, read from them. So here is just a basic example. So I create, and it does, so I should show how this actually works. So this is, there is no foo, actually, I can show you this even. Gr8Ladies. Where, don't click on. Oh, this is running from home. Anyway, I don't have a file. It's going to create one in the directory where console was started from. So that was something I didn't look up before I started console. And it should contain these 2. Now, this is a void, so it's not going to do anything. But on the next example, I can read from that file. Which was, and then, I mean, I did it, so there's more things, another closure. So instead of each on a collection, you would do each line in a file. There's lots of docs on all the different method names and things you can do. So we're gonna process a line. So what I did is I replaced hello with hi and output that here. Super simple examples for an introductory thing.
Is there a way to get rid of the handle to the file without, so like if you opened it and you're done and you want to release that, to the operating system, can you close that handle?
You can explicitly close it, yes. But it'll handle it for you after the script is done.
Okay. Yeah. Or like if it's in a function and you get a handle to it and you hit the function, it will close that.
Yeah. Yeah. So Groovy is just specifying all those defaults for you, and that's where it's advantageous. Okay, so I think I am way ahead on time because this runs till 2. Okay. So we can create a file if we want to. So I had an example. Oh, I didn't pull it up. I get rid of all this formatting. I could do users, so I could take like my mailing list of all of my Gr8Ladies users. If it's a basic CSV file, I haven't written it out yet, but take that, extract their email addresses, do different things, just really simple scripting things. Do we want to try an example? Go off script. Okay. For reference here. So I can user one user at email.com. I mean, I can also mixing things here. Who's going to make it in object? So if it's just a string here, okay, my file. So if you don't, like I said, if you don't specify it's IT, oh, I totally forgot to do the string manipulation. So in Groovy, well, normally, so in other languages, and this is one of the things that really tripped me up at first, it's tokenized, split, but split is valid too. Split is on white spaces, tokenized to do a delimiter. So now I'm going to take each line and it's going to have all the fields and then print line of fields at what's it, 1. So we get user. So you can extract things from files pretty easily. There are, I mean, because CSV files can get more complicated with escaping. There are libraries just to handle it. But if you're doing something super simple, you can even stay in the console. I do have IntelliJ up. That is normally what we use for Groovy. It's got all the plugins and you can run everything from it when you get big packages and Grails. You have to specify where Groovy is. If you're using Grails or other frameworks, you have to include those as well. But IntelliJ is pretty smart. It will say, oh, Groovy is missing. Like, we detect Groovy files, but you don't have a path specified. And so anytime I start it or open a new project, it'll prompt me.
So most people use, or is there like stuff for clips and that means?
There are, but IntelliJ is not only popular, I would, because I tried it at first, because IntelliJ is a licensed thing, so it costs money. And
can you do a lot of that with the community edition? Or is the professional edition?
So I have the EAP on this one, I think. But I've used the community. The community doesn't have as many features. It's probably more similar to Eclipse as far as its feature set, in that it's very limited. But IntelliJ, like full-fledged IntelliJ, is awesome, and yeah, it is. Yeah, very worth it.
There is Groovy Grails tool suite that's based on Eclipse, but it's really bad. It's I would recommend buying IntelliJ or using the community edition versus the tool that they made that's supposed to be for Groovy. It's not very good.
Yeah.
There's also, I think, Spring. There's another editor as well that either has or is getting a refresh because Groovy has changed a lot since they last released. Let's see. So Yeah, so we've been doing questions throughout, so that's kind of good. Here, yeah, resources, the Gr8Ladies website. And I think that is it. So I am really, really early. Any questions? I guess it's free time then.
Does it have immutable values? Can you say like, I want to set this to this and then you can't change it?
You can, there's an immutable annotation. I'm not sure whether that's in Groovy or in Grails, though. I'd have to look it up because since I do use Grails at work, sometimes yeah. And yeah, so Grails is really popular framework, adds in an ORM, so you can, I mean, search things through a database. I mean, it does get a little messy because it's mostly relational, but there are Mongo plugins, there's other things too.
Is there a ORM based off active record, or is it?
So I'm going to turn
That's
off
not-
Google
active record is a
Hangout.
copy of the one in Rails, so